He's the self-proclaimed special one, a man whose ego is as legendary as his record. Some call him a genius and others can't stand him, but love him or hate him, one thing's for sure. José Mourinho has always thrived with the world against him, but there's always a pattern with Mourinho. He starts incredibly well at any job he goes to, but after his third season in most cases, it all ends in tears. We're going to take a look at the 3-year curse of José Mourinho and try to understand why this continuously happens throughout his whole career. But first, we need to understand what made Mourinho the man he is today. José Mourinho's love for football was ingrained in him before he was even born. His father, Felix Mourinho, was a professional goalkeeper and later a top-flight manager in Portugal. Growing up in that environment, young José saw firsthand how rewarding and ruthless football could be. So it wasn't that surprising when he decided to follow in his father's footsteps. As a teenager, Mourinho signed as a prospect, joining the youth side of Rio Ave in the 1980s, with dreams of becoming a top player. But there was the problem. Despite his promise, Mourinho never made it past reserve level and soon realised something that would change his path forever. The fact that he didn't have what it takes to be a top player. Yet, even in that moment, his sharp football mind shone through. Instead of chasing a playing career that wouldn't take off, he made a bold choice. At just 23, he walked away from professional football, but not from the game itself. Mourinho knew his future wasn't on the pitch. It was on the sidelines, as a manager, but he understood that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. So he started small, working as a PE teacher and studying sports science, or earning his coaching qualifications on the side. Then in 1992, his unexpected big break came. Bobby Robson, the iconic English manager, had just taken over at Sporting Lisbon, but there was a problem. He didn't speak any Portuguese. That's where Mourinho comes in, who took an unlikely job as Robson's translator. But this wasn't just about language. Mourinho was translating football. It was the perfect opportunity. He got to work alongside a world-class manager at a top club, and what started as a simple translation job quickly became much more. Mourinho's deep understanding of the game and meticulous work ethic caught Robson's attention. He became more than just an interpreter, trusted with scouting reports and tactical insights. When Robson moved on to Porto and later Barcelona, he brought Mourinho along. The pair formed a dynamic duo, master and apprentice. Robson once said, "He'd hand me dossiers as good as anything I've ever seen." He was in his early 30s, never a top player or coach, yet his work was first class. Together they won 8 trophies at Sporting, Porto and Barcelona, including 2 Portuguese titles and a Copa del Rey. But when Robson was eventually sacked from Barcelona, Mourinho didn't follow him this time. He stayed under new coach Louis van Gaal, who recognised Mourinho's potential and even let him take charge of the first team during cup competitions. This was where Mourinho truly started coming into his own. No longer just a translator, but a football mastermind in the making. Following 3 successful seasons as an assistant to Louis van Gaal, José Mourinho was on the cusp of something big and took his next step at Benfica, working under another legendary coach, Jupp Heynckes. But being an assistant wasn't enough for Mourinho. He was destined for greatness. So in 2000, Heynckes was sacked and the unthinkable happened. Mourinho, at just 37 and with no prior managerial experience, was handed the reins of Benfica, one of Portugal's most prestigious clubs. Mourinho was ready to shine. Just weeks into his tenure, he made a statement by leading Benfica to a stunning 3-0 victory over their fierce rivals, Sporting. It was a match that announced his arrival, but it was short-lived. After only 11 games, politics rather than performance dictated his fate. A new club president took office and had different plans for them. In a bold move, Mourinho resigned, unwilling to compromise his vision. For a year he found himself on the sidelines, but soon an opportunity arose at União de Leiria. I may have definitely butchered that. Moving on. Mourinho seized the chance and turned the club's fortunes around, guiding them to an impressive 4th place after 19 games in the 2001-2002 season. His success was hard to ignore, and it wasn't long before powerhouse FC Porto came knocking and poached him midway through the season. At Porto, Mourinho was met with a club struggling to find its footing. They hadn't won a league title in 4 years and were far from competing for European honours. But with Mourinho at the helm, everything changed. He guided Porto to a 3rd place finish, laying the groundwork for his first full season in charge, a season that would propel Mourinho to new heights. In that first full campaign, Mourinho achieved what many thought impossible. Porto claimed the Primeira Liga, the Portuguese Cup, and the UEFA Cup, now known as the UEFA Europa League. But this remarkable treble, in his first season as a head coach, was just the beginning of it, and it would set the stage for even greater heights. The following season, Mourinho aimed higher and higher. He led Porto to victory in the Portuguese Super Cup, and then the team became unstoppable in the domestic league, embarking on a sensational 27-match unbeaten run that lasted from the season's start until early April, which helped him clinch the league title 5 weeks before the end of the season. But he wasn't done there. The pinnacle of Mourinho's early success came on the European stage. Porto faced and knocked out giants like Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United, Lyon, and Deportivo La Coruña on their journey to the Champions League final. In the final, Porto delivered a masterclass, beating Monaco 3-0 and securing the prestigious trophy. It was a triumph that truly introduced Mourinho to the world, solidifying his reputation as the most exciting coach in football. His ability to outsmart opponents, coupled with his flair for dramatic celebrations, left no doubt Mourinho had arrived and he was here to stay and win. After conquering Portugal and winning every title on offer with Porto, José Mourinho was ready for a new challenge. That challenge came knocking from the home of football itself, London, when Chelsea Football Club came calling. Mourinho became the first ever Portuguese manager in the Premier League, and he made quite the entrance. In his very first press conference, he famously declared himself the special one, setting the stage for a captivating tenure. John Terry, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, Damien Duff, and Claude Makelele were just a few of the names that filled the dressing room. Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich was generous with the chequebook, allowing Mourinho to bring in key signings like Petr Cech, Ian Robben, and then Ricardo Carvalho and Paulo Ferreira from Porto. And it didn't take long for Mourinho's impact in West London to be felt. He led Chelsea to victory in the League Cup, clinching a thrilling 3-2 win over Liverpool. This match showcased Mourinho's unique flair. When Liverpool fans taunted him, he silenced them with a finger to his lips, a moment that captured the media's attention. That being said, Chelsea were knocked out of the Champions League semi-finals by Liverpool, by the famous, or infamous, ghost goal. But any lingering sadness from Europe quickly faded as Mourinho tackled a 50-year title drought by guiding Chelsea to a record-breaking 95 points, winning the Premier League title in his very first campaign at Stamford Bridge. Mourinho's tactical innovations were a hallmark of his tenure. He employed a disciplined 4-3-3 formation, transforming Chelsea's approach to the game. The focus on counter-attacking became central to his strategy, with a compact defence neutralising opponents while his players exploited gaps on the break. Mourinho utilised a triangle-shaped midfield, allowing Chelsea to dominate matches against teams that often played a standard 4-4-2. While the attack was formidable, it was the solid defence and hard-working midfield that provided ample opportunities for his strikers. The results were staggering. Chelsea kept 25 clean sheets, conceding just 15 goals in the Premier League, a record that still stands to this day. And it was a formula of diligent defending and tenacious midfield, and a ruthless attack led by a powerful number 9. The following season, Mourinho retained the Premier League crown, this time conceding just 22 goals. As if back-to-back titles weren't enough, he added the League Cup and FA Cup. And with that start to his life in England, he was without a doubt the King of England, having won every domestic title possible. By his third season, the script took an unexpected turn. Despite being tipped to secure a third consecutive Premier League title, Mourinho and Chelsea parted ways early in the season by mutual consent. It was a surprising exit for a manager who'd rewritten the rulebook on success in English football. When Mourinho left Chelsea, he was a relatively young manager with a world of potential still ahead of him. At just 44 years old, he'd already claimed a Champions League title, 4 league titles, a UEFA Cup victory, and 4 domestic cups across 2 countries. He was without a doubt a silverware magnet, and it didn't take long for suitors to come calling. But it would be 10 months before the right opportunity arose, and that was when Mourinho took his talents, success pedigree, and unmistakable personality to Milan, joining Inter. This time around, Mourinho shifted his tactics. While he had favoured a 4-3-3 at Chelsea, he predominantly employed a 4-3-1-2 diamond formation or a 4-2-3-1 at Inter. His team was built on incredibly organised low block, meticulously designed to absorb pressure and mentally wear down opponents. This approach allowed them to strike decisively when their rivals were most vulnerable. In his first season, Mourinho bagged the Italian Super Cup and the Scudetto. However, some Inter fans were left feeling disappointed, as the club's performances in the Champions League mirrored those of his predecessors, Roberto Mancini, falling short of their lofty ambitions. But that perceived failure proved pivotal. It pushed Mourinho to identify what his team needed to reach the next level. That summer, Inter made key signings, bringing in Wesley Sneijder, Diego Milito, and Samuel Eto'o. With these reinforcements, Mourinho orchestrated a season of unprecedented success. He led Inter to a Serie A title, the Coppa Italia, and most importantly, a long-awaited Champions League trophy, triumphing 2-0 over Bayern in the final. The Champions League campaign was a showcase of Mourinho's tactical brilliance, particularly during the quarter-finals against his arch-rival Pep Guardiola and a prime Lionel Messi. Inter edged out Barcelona 3-2 on aggregate, a match marked by Mourinho's defensive masterclass. It culminated in an epic celebration, where he famously ran around the Camp Nou, revelling in victory. When Mourinho had walked away from Inter, fresh off a stunning Champions League win, it felt like the end of an era. But the sadness didn't last long. Real Madrid was calling, a club with one mission for him: stop Messi, stop Pep, and stop Barcelona. Barcelona had become a football juggernaut, and Madrid had been stuck in the shadows. But Mourinho was ready to flip the script. From the moment he arrived in Madrid, Mourinho's presence was felt. The Galacticos were already a star-studded team, with Ronaldo, Kaká, Benzema and Xabi Alonso leading the charge. But Mourinho wasn't satisfied with what he inherited. He wanted more, so he went to work, bringing in players like Mesut Ozil, Sami Khedira and Angel Di Maria, while club legends like Raúl and Guti, who'd been at the heart and soul of Madrid for years, were ushered out, signalling a new era. His first season was a rollercoaster. His team racked up wins and set high standards, but Barcelona remained a constant thorn in their side. The most brutal reminder came in his first El Clasico. Barcelona absolutely humiliated Real Madrid with a 5-0 thrashing at the Camp Nou. It was a night that Madristas would rather forget, and Florentino Perez, Madrid's president, called it one of the worst defeats in the club's history. In the Champions League, Barcelona dealt another painful blow, knocking out Madrid in a controversial and fiery semi-final. Accusations of dirty tactics, arguments with the officials, and heated moments on and off the pitch made this one of the most intense battles in European football. But through all the chaos, Mourinho managed to claim a victory that meant more than most would think: the Copa del Rey. For some, it was just a domestic cup, but in the context of Real Madrid v Barcelona, it was a declaration of intent. However, being the special one meant drama was never far away. Mourinho's tenure at Madrid was filled with tension, controversies, and fiery moments. One of the most infamous stories was the time Mourinho confronted a referee in a parking lot, adding to the long list of dramatic episodes. And this wouldn't be the first time he's confronted a referee in the parking lot, but more on that later. Anyway, despite all of this off-field chaos, Mourinho delivered on the pitch when it mattered most. In his second season, Mourinho's Real Madrid transformed into a ruthless machine. The team's counter-attacking football became their signature: fast, direct and lethal. They dominated teams with blistering pace and precision. Xabi Alonso was the maestro in the midfield, pulling the strings, while Khedira acted as the engine, driving the team forward. Ozil was the creative heartbeat, unlocking defences, and Di Maria added flair and unpredictability from the wing. But the crown jewel of this attack was, of course, Cristiano Ronaldo, who was at the absolute peak of his powers. Ronaldo scored an astonishing 60 goals that season, becoming an unstoppable force. Real Madrid set records that season: most wins, most away wins, most points in away matches, and the highest goal difference. And the crowning achievement, of course, was 100 points in La Liga. They racked up 121 goals, obliterating defences across Spain. But the sweetest part wasn't just the records, it was that they won the league. This wasn't just a title win, it was a total dismantling of the very team that had dominated them. The pressure was so immense that Guardiola, who'd been a thorn in Madrid's side, stepped down. The Mourinho era in Spain had begun, and it felt like Real Madrid was ready to rule. Then came the infamous third season, the Mourinho curse. The unstoppable Madrid machine sputtered. Rumours swirled that he'd fallen out with key players, including Ronaldo. His biggest clash was dropping captain Iker Casillas, a club legend, for Diego Lopez. But the result on the pitch was also bad. Barcelona took the league back, Atletico Madrid beat them in the Copa del Rey final, and the Champions League dream was crushed again, this time by a young Robert Lewandowski, who tore them apart with 4 goals in the semi-final. Mourinho called it the worst season of my career. It marked the end of his Madrid reign. Yet in typical Mourinho fashion, he left with his head held high. He achieved his dream of winning league titles in England, Italy and Spain, and in the summer of 2013, when Mourinho hit the job market, he didn't stay there long. Chelsea came calling once again, and nearly 6 years after his successful first stint at Stamford Bridge ended, Mourinho returned to the club he once dominated with. Chelsea had slipped in the Premier League standings, but Mourinho's arrival brought immediate change. He took over a squad that combined seasoned veterans like Cech, John Terry, Frank Lampard and Fernando Torres with younger stars like Eden Hazard, Oscar, and he brought in players like Diego Costa. In his first season back, he propelled the Blues to third, just 4 points off the eventual title winners Man City. But as with any Mourinho campaign, controversy was never far behind. From telling a ball boy that he'd one day get punched for wasting time, to publicly calling Arsenal coach Wenger a specialist in failure, Mourinho's first year back at Chelsea was as fiery as ever. Although his team came close, the season ended trophyless, but not without drama. Things changed quickly in Mourinho's second season back in charge. Chelsea lifted the League Cup with a 2-0 victory over Tottenham at Wembley and secured the Premier League title in May with 3 games to spare. Mourinho had restored Chelsea to glory, but just as fast as he brought success, the third season curse seemed to catch up to him again. Chelsea's fortunes took a nosedive during the 2015-16 campaign, starting with a very public fallout with team physio Eva Caniero, whom Mourinho criticised for treating an injured player too slowly during a match against Swansea. What followed was a string of poor results, controversies with the media, fines, and even a stadium ban from the FA. As Chelsea's form continued to decline, the team found itself 16th, just 1 point above the relegation zone in December. Mourinho was sacked for the second time, leaving Stamford Bridge in turmoil. Despite his exit, Mourinho wasn't done with English football. Less than 6 months later, he took over another giant in need of revival, Manchester United. Replacing his old mentor Louis van Gaal at Old Trafford, Mourinho arrived for the 2016-17 season with high expectations. The once dominant Red Devils had been searching for stability since Ferguson's retirement. Mourinho took charge of a squad filled with a mix of veterans like Rooney, David De Gea, and young talents like Marcus Rashford and Anthony Martial. His return to the Premier League saw some blockbuster signings, most notably the return of Paul Pogba for a world record fee, along with the arrival of Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Mourinho's first season at United brought back a sense of hope. Starting with a Community Shield win, the team went on to capture the League Cup and finish the season with a UEFA Europa League trophy, the club's first European silverware since 2008. It wasn't the Premier League title, but it was enough to consider Mourinho's first year a success. His second season, while trophyless, saw United achieve their highest Premier League finish since Ferguson's departure, placing second behind Pep Guardiola's unstoppable Manchester City. However, by his third season, you see where this is going, the cracks began to show once again. Mourinho's famous third season syndrome reared its head as tensions between him and key players like Paul Pogba and Martial became public. Dressing room unrest leaked into their performances on the pitch, and by December 2018, with United in 6th and far off the pace in the title race, Mourinho was dismissed. In his final press conference, he made sure to remind the world of his illustrious career and what he'd achieved, leaving with one last message of defiance. After leaving Manchester United in 2018, Mourinho's next move came as a surprise to many. In 2019, he took over as the head coach of Tottenham Hotspur, a club desperate to break their long-standing trophy drought. In his first season with Spurs, Mourinho led them to a 6th place finish in the Premier League, but his 15-month stint wasn't known for an on-field glory. Instead, it became iconic for his role in the Amazon documentary All or Nothing, Tottenham Hotspur, which offered a rare behind-the-scenes look at Mourinho's leadership style. Off the field, he was a star, but on the pitch, Spurs continued to struggle with inconsistency. And with these struggles, tensions rose between Mourinho and key players, and although he'd led Spurs to a League Cup final, his future was decided before the match. Just days before the big game, club president Daniel Levy made the shocking choice to sack Mourinho. Spurs went on to lose the final, and their trophy drought, which had lasted since 2008, continued. Many thought it was a rash decision to fire Mourinho before such an important match, especially considering his strong record in finals. But Tottenham's loss wasn't the end of Mourinho's journey. Not even close. Unfazed by his short and rocky time at Tottenham, Mourinho quickly bounced back, taking on a new challenge in Italy with Roma just a few months later. It was a bold move. Roma hadn't lifted a trophy since 2008, and were stuck in the middle of the table, far from the top. But this is where Mourinho shines. In his first season, he led Roma to win the Conference League in 2022, making history yet again. This victory added another achievement to his already impressive resume, making him the first manager to complete a UEFA treble, 2 Champions Leagues with Porto and Inter Milan, 2 Europa Leagues with Porto and Manchester United, and now the Conference League with Roma. To celebrate the achievement, Mourinho got a tattoo of the 3 trophies, a lasting symbol of his place in football history. Even though he led Roma to the Europa League final the next year, by his 3rd season, the team's performances in the league started to drop. And as the season went on, Roma struggled to keep up and were far from competing for the title. In the end, Mourinho was sacked, but not before leaving his mark by bringing a much-needed trophy to Roma. So before I get into what I think the reasons are for this 3-year curse, ignore the trim. I'm getting a haircut on Saturday and I'm getting it braided, but I wanted to make the video, so you got to deal with this. But anyway, there's 3 key reasons why I think the 3-year curse exists. The first one is, with Mourinho, he takes the clubs he's managing to just a next level, and with Porto, Chelsea and Inter Milan specifically, and Madrid to some extent, they all absolutely adored him. The issue is Mourinho's relationship with the board. That seems to be the common thread in all of this. Mourinho always seems to fall out with board members, and whilst we don't have visibility on exactly what he's falling out over, I can imagine it's probably transfer targets or other political issues, and you kind of saw some evidence of that in his early career. For what it's worth, his relationships at Chelsea aren't as bad, because that's the only team he's actually gone back to manage, and they accepted him with open arms, and he won another Premier League. So Mourinho's definitely the type of guy to burn bridges in his previous jobs. The second reason I think this curse exists is because I think Mourinho's quite an intense character. He's passionate, he's motivated, he wants to win, and he's got that mentality. And unfortunately, if some of those players don't hit that mentality, then they're not going to make it. And that's what maybe ruffles a few feathers. And also, if he's doing that for 2 to 3 years, that intensity can just have an impact on the players on the pitch. And ultimately that can lead to a drop in performance levels. And when you see that drop in performance levels, that's when he may also fall out with players. As you've seen at Madrid, he fell out with some of the players there. He's fallen out with some of the players at Chelsea, at Roma, and even at Inter Milan. So I think that's a common thing you see with him. And if you fall out with the board and fall out with the players, then it's not going to be great. And the third and maybe most important point is, I think Mourinho sets a standard and bar for himself. So if he hasn't won anything in those first 2 years, he's often not really cut any slack. And people might, have some gripe with his football and his style of play. However, I would argue he did play some great stuff when he was at Chelsea for his 2nd season and Madrid. He famously got those 100 points there. So his teams were clearly playing good football. But there have been times where maybe his football scene is quite pragmatic, and there's a new era of coaching which is all about, playing out from the back and these passing moves, which Mourinho teams aren't really famous for. And I think that's probably hindered him in this modern game, and it's kind of maybe tainted some of his reputation, and maybe people don't really give him the respect he deserves. But I'm going to leave that there, and let me know in the comments what you think about José Mourinho. Is he a dinosaur? Is he finished? Or do you think he's still got one more chance at one big club? See you later.